Hello, my name is Heather Heiman, and I am the Human Trafficking Prevention Project Manager here at Maryland Volunteer Lawyer Service. Today I wanted to talk to you because it is January, which is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And this means you are most likely going to be seeing articles and posts about human trafficking on your social media and news feeds. There is a lot of information about this issue that gets put out this month, so I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about some myths about human trafficking and discuss what we're seeing here at the HTPP. So first, about numbers. It's really hard to find accurate information about the prevalence of human trafficking in the United States. Many of the numbers that we see are cited in reports might be very old, or they've been discredited or taken out of context. For example, one number that I see floated quite frequently is that between 100,000 and 300,000 children get trafficked in the United States. And this number is actually from a report that's over 2 decades old. The author has actually, since that time, kind of distanced himself from that finding, and the report actually states not that there have been 100 to 300,000 trafficking cases involving children, but that 300,000 children might be at risk. So you can see how information can kind of change and get manipulated, but that is something that we see circulated quite a lot. With that in mind, I think the bottom line is to just take any numbers that you see with a grain of salt. So second, where trafficking is happening in the United States. This image, which is from the National Human Trafficking Hotline, is often used to show the prevalence of human trafficking in the United States. But it's really important to remember that this image, which you'll see in news reports and posts on social media, it actually doesn't represent cases. What it represents is calls to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. The red area shows the most frequent calls, and then areas where there aren't pings on the map or places where the hotline hasn't received any calls. This isn't, these calls can be things like tips, it can be advocates reaching out for information, and it also might be survivors who are reaching out for help. But again, there might be multiple calls related to one case. There might be multiple cases or victims related to one call. So while this map is interesting and can provide us with some information, it doesn't show prevalence of trafficking in the U.S. These areas where there's no calls doesn't mean there's not trafficking. It just means people aren't using the hotline. And Polaris Project, which runs the National Human Trafficking Hotline, actually does do a great deeper dive into the data that they get. This is their Maryland Spotlight, which is available on their website. And you can click through to any state and find more information about the types of communications they receive and what they were able to deduce about cases in your state from these various fact sheets. So I'd encourage you to look at these. The third thing I want to talk about is who is actually impacted by human trafficking. Unfortunately, most movies and a lot of imagery put out about this issue frames victims as being young, often white, cisgender women who are kidnapped or taken overseas by a trafficker, which can lead to a lot of people thinking that trafficking only happens to a certain group of people, or that you have to be taken over an international border to be trafficked. And this is simply not true. I want to be clear. So trafficking can happen to anyone. A victim can be a person of any age, any race, any gender identity or sexual orientation. They might be people with different economic and education levels. You can be trafficked in the neighborhood or city that you grew up in. You might be taken to a new place. The bottom line is that traffickers are looking for a vulnerability they can exploit and a need they can meet, and they look for ways to isolate and control their victims. With the clients that we work with, we see a lot of people who are facing other factors that make them vulnerable. We work with individuals that they've experienced sexual abuse or domestic violence. They may be struggling with housing instability. They might have used drugs or been arrested for trading sex in the past. Some of our clients are also individuals who have grappled with systemic racism, over-policing, homophobia, other forms of discrimination, and have lacked access to basic services and resources. Some of these clients are survivors of trafficking, and some, in line with the preventative nature of our work, are really people that are at high risk of exploitation. Regardless, though, we always try to create a welcoming, non-judgmental environment and look for attorneys and other resources that can do the same. So, in conclusion, this month, I'm really urging you to be a critical and thoughtful reader and to share information that accurately reflects and doesn't sensationalize this issue. Thank you.